Welcome to Hacking Health, the podcast where spirituality and science merge to better the lives of our listeners. I'm your host, Waylon Gomez, and today's a very, very special day because we're talking about the steps to meditation. And I don't just mean the idea of like sit down, shut up, find enlightenment. I mean a real strategic process to helping you in your meditation practice, even if you've never meditated a day in your life. Actually, arguably better if you've never meditated a day in your life because it's going to make this process make so much more sense from the start. And you may find that you actually take years off of your meditation practice if you had done it through a traditional route. So let's dive right in. Let's talk first about the idea of why we struggle with meditation so much. And in our last episode, we went into some deep neuroscience behind why that could be. So I'm going to just kind of give a brief overview. That way we can get anybody who hasn't watched that up to speed. And then just to recap for anybody who did watch that. So the main thing is like overthinking, right? When we're in meditation, we struggle with overthinking. When we're in meditation, we struggle with all this introspection and all these thoughts of coulda, shoulda, woulda, daydreaming, even rumination, where it's like, oh man, if only I had done that thing, or maybe they don't like me, or maybe they do like me, or oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Clearly not the point of meditation. But all of this surrounds the default mode network. And all of this surrounds our default attention. So the whole idea is that part of the reason why we struggle with meditation is because we don't know what we're supposed to actually experience. I mean, think about it. How many of you have gone to a meditation retreat or this thing or that thing and had it go like a dissertation, almost like it was a scientific dissertation? How many people had clearly defined steps of when you go into this state, you'll feel this thing. When you go into that state, you'll feel that thing. Versus, well, the spirit will overtake you. And as the spirit overtakes you and just embodies your experience, you'll slowly find yourself drifting into a transcendental space of astral nature. And as you go into that transcendental space of astral nature, you'll become the inevitable seed, the seed of consciousness, and you'll merge your one with the all. And as you experience that, you'll finally start to understand the purpose, which is in our next course. So that's for next time. That's a little bit of a pay bump, but it's well worth it to go to that one if you really want to reach enlightenment. Now, I'm not knocking anybody here who speaks like that. But what I am knocking is the approach to meditation as something that's commodified and is only available to an elite that can afford the paywall. Because here's the thing. The truth is that meditation is something that's supposed to be available to all of us. Enlightenment is supposed to be something that's available to all of us. And it shouldn't be through a paywall that we have to go to be able to reach that understanding that arguably I don't think a lot of those people actually have. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that I'm someone who has reached enlightenment. I don't think I've reached enlightenment. I don't think I'm even remotely close. But what I am is I'm curious. I'm curious about this possibility of finding a way that we can start to merge the science and the spirituality together to create processes and practices that are easy for you guys. And no, I'm not talking about easy in terms of just throw an app on and then I'll reach enlightenment, but I'm talking about something that you can actually get behind because there's steps and processes to it. Here's the issue. The issue is the fact that right now your meditation practice probably doesn't have a very well or clear defined idea of what it's trying to do. If you're going onto an app and you're finding a different meditation every single day, then maybe each one of those kind of has a clearly defined thing. But what you have to understand about guided meditation is that it's really more like hypnosis than anything else. The purpose of the guidance of the meditation is to focus your attention on the words. As you focus your attention on the words longer and longer, you start to get overloaded with a lot of data and information that eventually allows you to escape into what would be considered more of a hypnotic state and take on that positive suggestion. Now, that being said, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not meditation. So what we have to understand is that then meditation is a conscious process. It's not an unconscious process. If when we're in our guided meditations, we start to find ourselves drifting away, then are we actually doing the thing that meditation is trying to teach us, which is to become more conscious, not more unconscious, more awake, not more asleep? Now, again, some of this may upset some of you, so if it does, I apologize. But if it does, I'm going to redact my apology and say, what is it inside of you that's getting upset? Because I know for me, when I first started to learn about this stuff, I got really, really upset. I got pissed even. Why? Because I didn't want to believe that what I was doing was not going to have a beneficial effect in terms of helping me to reach higher states of consciousness and understanding about life. That was the cold, hard truth of it. But I also recognized that I hadn't really been putting in a whole lot of effort to something that I was seemingly really, really interested in. And if you're listening to this depth and degree, you're probably fairly interested in meditation. So why take this route that's going to be easy but not very fruitful when you could put in a little bit more effort by understanding what it is that we're trying to actually do, and then reach things that most people will not reach things that most people will not be able to experience. Not to say you're better than them, but to say that you've actually put in the work and now you're going to receive the rewards for putting in that work. So let's talk about this a little bit deeper. When we're looking at the whole idea of a proven pathway to meditation, and I say proven in terms of it's step by step laid out, not by saying if you do this, you'll reach enlightenment. There's many, many other sides to enlightenment that I think we don't fully understand. And my personal belief is enlightenment is not something that we reach once. Enlightenment is something that we choose to understand about the nature of our reality from moment to moment. It's not a state that I initially get into and say, cool, I'm done. All right. And that's it. It's something that we experience again and again and again in varying degrees and forms that allow us to understand that we are whittling away at all of the constructs that we have created. That it's not something where meditation is supposed to be an adding on. Meditation is supposed to be a stripping away until the only thing that's left is the awareness of you as you've always been, in your purest sense, in your totality. So, if that wasn't existential enough for you, we're not going to get any more existential. So what I want to talk about is a proven pathway to meditation. Now, there are some different steps that I'm going to outline. And each one of these steps is going to be a different aspect of what's necessary to create a proper meditation practice. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is our environment. Because here's the thing. When you look at the idea of monastic life, it is freaking beautiful. It's beautiful, right? You're at an ashram, you're at a monastery, you're at any of these other places where you're surrounded by all of this beauty. And then you have the modern day meditator who is probably meditating in a so-so 2-bedroom apartment in a so-so part of town, and there's cars going by and there's noises and there's now loud neighbors. So again, when you look at the whole idea of starting out, we're talking about this as like fundamental process for meditation. We can eventually get to a place where we can meditate anywhere. That's the goal, because it's just shutting off the external senses and turning inward. So for instance, I've done a lot of different exercises over the past few years where I will go to, Pittsburgh, which is not too far away from where I live now. I used to live there, but I'll go to Pittsburgh in the city and be in downtown and just sit on the side of the street in a very, very crowded area during usually like a high traffic time and just sit in meditation. And it's a fascinating experience. Will I say it's for everybody? No, definitely not. Because you have to manage a lot of other energies that are not necessarily only your own. But what it taught me is the idea that when I go into an environment that's that intense, I have to recognize that intensity of the environment is going to shift my ability to let go of the environment. If I'm in a place where I'm surrounded by nature and everything's beautiful and I have no fight or flight response, then it's a whole heck of a lot easier for me to be able to just shift my awareness and accept these things that are coming in. But if I'm on a street corner and there's people yelling at each other and maybe a gun's going to get pulled and I hear the police coming, maybe that's far away, maybe that's close, I'm not entirely sure. That's a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different can of worms that I don't think most of us should take the approach to try to get to, because it's a seeking and a searching. And what I even found within myself, it was a seeking and a searching to do something that was beyond the normal. And this is the problem, guys. We don't reach enlightenment because we want to become super natural, or we want to become incredible, or we want to do it because we want to become extraordinary. And what I mean by that word is we want to become extraordinary. We want to become simple in our speech, in our thought, in our disposition. We want to take all of these incredible, beautiful colors of life and start to dim them into the reality that everything is this gray and that that's the purpose. And it doesn't mean that we don't experience the beauty. We do. It just means we don't get caught up in it anymore because we realize that it's all an illusion. So now we're reeling back from existentialism. I know I promised we wouldn't go there, but be prepared because sometimes I make promises and life has a different idea in store. So it sounds like today's episode is going to be about existential crises. So if anybody needs to talk to someone afterwards, leave a comment. And I'm sure there'll be someone in the comments who can kind of talk you off the nihilistic ledge and get you back into a place where things matter again. But the reason why I say that is because when we look at the idea of the environment plays a really big role in our meditation practice. If you're sitting in, your family room where the kids are usually always playing and there's all this active energy, your mind anchors experiences to rooms in different ways. That's why when you go to your bedroom, you normally fall asleep pretty quickly, unless you're watching TV and eating and doing all these other things in your bedroom. That's why when you go to a hotel, you usually have a pretty good night's sleep because there's this agreement frame that you have anchored already that the hotel is going to be a good night's sleep. But if the first time you went to a hotel, you had an awful night's sleep, then that might be what's anchored. So again, when we look at the environment, what we start to realize is that the environment is all about placing appropriate anchors so that we can have the experience that we're looking for. So one of the ways that I want to look at this is the idea of ritualistic space. When you do a meditation practice, you want to have a dedicated space for it. Now, most people say it's because it cultivates the energy in the space to be that. What we're really saying is that it creates a subconscious anchor that when I go into this room, this is how I feel. Simple as that. That's the energetic component of it. It's when I create that association in my mind, it becomes a lot easier for me to drop into these really relaxed states that are good for meditation and these peaceful states because that's the only thing I do in this room. Now, again, if you don't have the ability to create a dedicated room for this, you can create something as simple as a corner. Heck, you can even do something like take a hula hoop and place a hula hoop in a particular place in the room. And then when you're done with your meditation practice, take that hula hoop and put it back up. And it's going to be a ring of association. So the moment that you sit inside of that circle, you're going to feel like you want to go into this meditative state. That's the key. When we look at the whole idea of incense, the purpose behind incense is that it's the olfactory response, which means it's the most powerful memory association. If you've ever had a smell that you've just like wafted and you're like, oh my God, I'm 4 years old again. That's the olfactory response. It's the quickest response in terms of memory association. So if it's the quickest response, then why the heck were these people using it? It wasn't to connect with these deities and everything else, though that's beautiful. They were using it because it's a subconscious anchor that when I smell that scent, I do meditation. All of this stuff, as we demystify it, allows you to see that each and every one of these ritualistic practices is just setting you up for success in what it is you're trying to do. The other thing we have to look at when it comes to meditation is that time of day matters. So most of you are probably individuals who meditate in the morning. I know I did for a very, very long time. And here's the thing, stop meditating in the morning. Here's why I say stop meditating in the morning. The morning is when your default mode network has the most overactivity to it. That's when it's in its most heightened state. And that's also, first thing in the morning, is when you're in your most suggestible state. So again, when you look at monastic life, it usually wasn't meditation first thing in the morning. It was prayer first thing in the morning. And the reason why is because prayer is attenuation to a focus on the vocalization of particular words. What are those words? Usually they're very beautiful things. Sometimes they're polemic. Sometimes they're things that are certain deities. But all of this stuff creates subconscious programming that's no different than positive affirmations. So again, when you wake up first thing in the morning, it's a great time to do chanting. You can chant Om, you can chant Lam Ram Vam Hum, you can chant whatever you want. Or positive affirmations. Because though you're going to have a lot of default mode network activity initially, as you start focusing on the vocalization, what it's going to do is it's going to shut down that default mode network. It's more powerful if you can do it in a group just because that law of resonance kicks in. And so you are hearing other people as you are doing it, or in a room where you have a lot of reverberation can be beneficial because you're hearing yourself. But again, if you don't have that, it's not a super important thing. What's important is recognizing that when you wake up first thing in the morning, you're trying to set the precedent for the day. So I want you to just workshop this with me real quick. Here's what you don't want to do. You wake up first thing in the morning. Maybe you're a little bit tired and groggy, but you say, 10 minutes for meditation. So you sit down to meditation, right? And your mind is in a hyper-suggestible state, which means whatever you say in that introspection, in that default mode network, it goes directly to the subconscious mind and becomes your programming for how you see yourself in meditation. So you sit down in meditation, right? And if you're not doing guided meditation, which we'll go into guided meditation in a minute, but if you're not doing guided meditation, you sit down and all these thoughts start coming to you. And you're like, man, I got to get my mind to shut up. Why can't my mind just shut up? I suck at meditation. Now, all of that is getting imprinted into your subconscious mind as belief structures. So what happens the next time you go to sit down to meditation? Well, all of that has just been anchored and it comes right back up. So again, the benefit of guided meditation, looking at it from the standpoint of just hypnosis, and the benefit of guided meditation as hypnosis, or we'll just call it hypnosis. The benefit of that is that it's positive affirmations. You wake up first thing in the morning, you end up throwing on your app, and you're doing a meditation on heart-centered mindfulness, or a meditation on energy or excitement or this thing or that thing. And that's great to do first thing in the morning. It's also not meditation, but that's great to do first thing in the morning. Why? Because what it's going to do is it's going to help overload your system with all of those positive affirmations. Now, it's not meditation, but it is affirmation. And that's going to help you with going throughout the rest of your day in a more positive space, which we know based off the last episode is going to help with not only creating better cognitive function over the length of your life, but also probably better emotional regulation and impulse control. So that being said, then you do that, and later on you meditate. The reason why you meditate later on is because now you're in a fully awakened state, which means that you're able to gravitate towards your focus better and you're not in such a hyper-suggestible state like you would be very early on in the morning. So when we look at that idea of the time of day, I'm not going to say there's a better or worse time. I'm going to say the worst time is probably first thing in the morning, especially if you already have a lot of overactivity in your default mode network. For me, I usually tend to go through a process where I will do some vocalization early in the morning. And sometimes I'll also do a cold shower, which we'll get into in a minute for why that helps with nervous system regulation and also waking you up. Then from there, I'll set my task list for the day, which starts to create even more of that task orientation focus. And then I'll sit down for meditation. And my meditations right now are usually lasting about 30 to 45 minutes. That's long for people to start with. But again, I've been doing this for quite a while, and now I'm starting to try to get a little bit more even systematic than I've been in terms of these processes. So I'm really trying to get into these states in a faster rate. But that means I have to know the split and the difference between those states. So again, something a little bit more advanced. But for starters, looking at the idea of a midday meditation, it's not a bad idea. So let's say you've got, an hour break for lunch. Why not take 5 minutes of that to meditate before you go back in for the rest of your day? Because if you can do something like that, or even micro meditations throughout the day, right? You set a timer for 5 minutes, 3 times or 4 times a day. And remember, meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged on some, lotus petal going like this. It doesn't have to be that, guys. You don't have to be in a place where you are doing it in any one particular function. It can be sitting in a chair. It can be standing up. It can be walking. It's the idea of focusing your attention. So the whole idea is that you do those micro meditations, or you pick a particular time and you do a 5 or a 10-minute meditation each day. Consistency is key with this. That's the main thing we have to focus on, is consistency. That's what we lack. If we have the consistency, then we're constantly getting that feedback loop of that positive reinforcement that our brain likes when we focus our attention appropriately. So the other thing that I want you to think about is your preparation for meditation. And we touched on this a little bit, but I want to go a little bit deeper. When you set up that space appropriately, when you prepare yourself for what it is that you're going to do, you prepare yourself for a particular outcome. Now, again, on these apps, you already have the outcome frame in mind, because it says, oh, This one is on happiness. This one is on joy. This one is on peace and calm. So you have that idea of this is the outcome I'm trying to get from it. But when you sit down for a meditation that's not guided, my question is, what's the outcome you're looking for? If you don't know what outcome you're looking for, then how do you know when you're going to reach it? Again, it may be the idea of being able to just simply focus on your breath and only focus on your breath. It may be the ability to start to not feel your body in three-dimensional space anymore. It may be the ability to still the breath so much that your heart slows down to 30 beats a minute, 20 beats a minute, and it's almost as if you're in this just kind of frozen state. Again, all of these are advanced perceptions of what meditation is, and I'm not saying the goal should be to try to reach samadhi right now, but what I am saying is that each and every one of these steps has a stage, has a state and a feeling, and has a concept tied to it that helps us know when we've reached it. If we don't have that, we don't know where we're walking. So we're building the map. Now, let's move on to step 2, the whole idea of the physiological factors. First one I'm going to talk about, sleep. If you are not sleeping enough, you are not going to be good at meditation. It's just not going to happen, because you have to realize that the purpose of meditation is a heightened state of awareness. It's not something that we can get into if we're in a deficit in any of these other places. So again, sleep, super, 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 super duper important. I'm always going to nail on that because most people are underslept by quite a significant amount. And what you find in meditation is that when you go into these altered states, if you don't have the proper amount of sleep, you're not going to be able to create the focus, and then you just fall asleep. And the goal of meditation is not to fall asleep, especially considering that if we continue falling asleep again and again and again, we create this association that when I go into meditation, I only reach this state and then I fall asleep. So one of the ways that we fix that is A, not doing it early in the morning, but B, getting enough sleep. Again, when you're doing these kinds of practices, it's not unheard of to get 9 or 10 hours of sleep a night just so that you're in that proper place. The other thing that I want to talk about is food. Now, no, I'm not going to go into the crazy in and outs of diet. I'm sure you can find that 8 million different places, and that's not my shtick. But what is my shtick when it comes to this is talking about the importance of eating a nutritional diet that's going to help support what you're doing here. You have to realize that meditation takes a lot of cognitive load. And if you're not in a place where you're providing that for your body normally anyway, what's going to happen when you start increasing the cognitive load? It's not going to go well. So again, making sure that you're eating enough food, making sure that you're eating healthy foods, making sure that you're getting enough nutrients, and also making sure that you're hydrated properly. If you're not hydrated properly, that takes a really, really, really big ding off your ability to have good cognitive load. So again, when we look at most individuals, when they get frustrated, the first thing you always should ask anyone who's frustrated is, when did you have water last? When did you drink water last? Because what you have to realize is that, again, part of the necessity for how our brain is working to not become completely overloaded is through that fluid transmission. Think about it. If an engine gets overheated, that engine ain't going to run very well. If the brain is like an engine, then we need to keep it properly cooled, and water is part of what helps us do that. But it goes a little bit further than just what's going on in the brain when it comes to hydration. It also has to do with the fascia and our posture. So this is where we start to look at, no, to do meditation, you don't need to be in a full lotus position. You don't have to put yourself like a sourdough pretzel, and then bake yourself in the sun so that you can finally reach enlightenment. That's not what we're talking about here. You don't have to be a master yogi to meditate. Heck, you don't even have to sit in a cross-legged position to meditate. But what you do have to be able to do is you have to be able to open up through your tissues. And what I mean by that is that for most people, their fascia is compressed. When your fascia is compressed, it gets really hard to send signals from your brain to your spine that help you with all of these different autonomic system shifts that happen when you're in meditation. So I'll say that again in a little bit of a different way to make it make more sense. I want you to think about some of these different crazy stories that you may or may not have heard of master meditators who will meditate for 7 days nonstop, 7 days and 7 nights. They stay in meditation. Now, I want you to think about where your body is right now when you meditate. Just think in your mind, if you have a meditation practice, how do you normally sit? And I want you to take that posture and I want you to just imagine sitting like that without moving for 7 days and 7 nights. Is it going to work out well, Or are you going to end up coming up of that? Like, are you going to end up coming up from that position at the end of those 7 days like you're the Walking Dead? Everything's creaking and cracking all over and you're going, oh God, I think I pulled something. That's probably what's going to happen. And the reason why is because your fascia is not appropriately conditioned for that position. So to put this in a little bit more of an easy way of understanding the fascial conditioning, you have to realize that our connective tissue, our fascia, which holds the tonicity of our muscles, and it also holds our posture, is directly connected to whatever positions we find ourselves in the most. That's why with meditation, having an erect spine, having a loose belly, and having an open shoulder, open neck, open hips, all of that is so important because that's the transmission of the fluid, that's the transmission of our nerves to our body while we're in meditation. If we don't have that, our legs are going to go numb, our belly is going to get tight, our neck's going to get tense, and before you know it, it's going to be really hard to stay in that position comfortably. And then we get into fight or flight. And then before you know it, our meditation practice is really just us trying to sit there until we can get uncomfortable enough where we can't stand it anymore and get so frustrated that then we get up. That's not the point of meditation. The point is to actively relax further and further into it each and every single time. So again, look at the idea of yoga classes, look at the idea of stretches, look at the idea of working with someone like a myofascial therapist. Again, in the past, I've created different courses on this, and I may, if you guys are interested, create a course specifically around meditation and how we can open up these fascial lines appropriately for sitting in meditation and how we can get into these postures in a way that aligns ourselves to what we need to be. So if that's something that you guys want, people who are listening, let me know down in the comments below. And if there's enough interest, maybe I'll actually make that as a course for you guys. So that being said, when we get to a place where we align our fascia appropriately, then it becomes so much easier to sit in meditation because the energy is flowing. What do we mean by the energy? There's the subtle energy where we're looking at chi or, any of these other terminologies. But I want to look a little bit more just at the physiological side of things. Now, I do believe chi is part of the physiology. Let that be known. Again, science and spirituality merging together. But when we look at the idea of fluid transmission, we're talking about not compressing our nerves. We're talking about proper blood flow and proper fluid flow through our body, even as we're sitting for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We're talking about not locking down our spine to where we compress everything, and before you know it, everything is squished. We're talking about a continual opening and expanding, a widening in our body that only happens when we balance and kind of almost push ourselves against gravity. What I mean is opposition. So it's learning how to do opposition to the point where we can get into this state and remain in this state. The goal of meditation is not supposed to compress your body. If anything, it should actually lengthen through your body. So there were master meditators that were known to be able to open up every single one of their vertebra, basically like chiropractic adjustments, but they were doing it intrinsically just by shifting the fascia. And we shifted the fascia through the idea of our conscious awareness and attenuation, as well as through our breathing. But again, guys, if you don't have a proper amount of hydration, none of this stuff happens. So hydration, food, and sleep are the first things we need to think about. Then we move on to the fascial component and starting to recorrect our posture so that we have a straight spine when we're doing meditation. Now, we're going to look at the whole idea of the brain training side of things. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is step 3, which is brain training. Now, brain training is a really, really important step when it comes to this whole idea of meditation, because this is where we set the foundation for what we're really trying to do. So first thing that we're going to talk about is mindfulness training. Now, we've talked a lot about mindfulness training, and basically it's focusing your attention on what it is you want to focus it on. Mindful eating, mindful communication, mindful TV watching, right? Anything can be a mindful practice. It's really just learning what it means to focus your attention. And what we're going for here is not necessarily saying, oh, I want to be mindful every single second of every single day. No. What we're saying is if we can understand what the feeling of being mindful is like, if we can understand what the feeling of being in the present moment is like, then it becomes so much easier to do that in meditation, which is part of the goal of meditation, is to be in that conscious awareness space. So the other thing we want to look at is what I kind of call the fix your shit principle. Process your emotions. When you go into meditation, one of the things that's going to come up is all of the stuff that you have not processed. You cannot fight it. The whole idea of reaching equanimity is by being able to process and let go of those things. You got regrets, you got worries, you got fears, you got anxieties, you got frustrations, fix them, process them. And I promise you, once you do that, meditation will become a lot easier. So again, therapy is a great way to do that. Somatic therapy is a great way to do that. Being able to get more in touch with how you're feeling through mindfulness practices surrounding your emotions and your behaviors is a great way to do that. But that's a pivotal, crucial step before we start any meditation practice, is being able to process our emotions appropriately. Now, the other thing we want to look at is reprogramming the subconscious mind. So again, like I said before, if you're in a place where you are saying, I suck at meditation, we got to fix that. We got to reprogram that to be something that's actually going to be advantageous for you. Otherwise, it's going to get in your way and it is not going to help you in meditation at all. So how do we do that? Well, one of the ways that we do that is by looking at the idea of like self-hypnosis or guided meditations, because guided meditations are going to give you those positive affirmations that are going to help you to start to reprogram some of those different subconscious habits and behaviors. The other way that we can do this is looking at journaling about our experience, because it offers a look into our subconscious mind when we just free journal, meaning you get a piece of paper, you get a pen, and you put that pen to paper and you don't let it lift up for 10 minutes and you just go and you don't stop writing. And what you will find is that things will come out that shock you. Things will come out that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was in there. And at first, it won't make any sense. And you'll be, as you're writing it, you'll be like, this is making no sense. And then you'll go back and you'll read it and you'll go, oh my gosh, that's the thing I've been struggling with for 10 years. And it's right in front of me and I can see it so clear as day. Wow. So again, anything that we can do to be able to help reprogram our subconscious to shift us into a state of equanimity, to shift us into a state where we're good at learning, where we're able to do meditation, where we have a focused mind. Those are the goals. Now, the other thing we want to do is build neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is our ability to think in different ways. It's our ability to rewire our neuronal fibers in different ways that are going to benefit us. So to rewire our neuronal fibers in ways that benefit us. To rewire our neuronal fibers in ways that benefit us. So what am I talking about here? Well, there's a law called Hebb's law, which is that neurons that wire together fire together. And what I mean by that is this is the law of association. So if, again, you set up that space and there's an association or an anchor of that space that like kids are playing and you had an argument with your spouse and then you sit down and you try to meditate, you've got all of that to deal with in your actual brain because that's how those things are wired and linked together. Now, on the flip side, let's say you set up a station and you end up, prepping by playing some nice music. You have this favorite song that you listen to just to get you in the right mood. You end up lighting some incense because it gives that beautiful smell and that thing that puts you in a calm state. And then you've anchored those associations with the meditative state that you're about to get into. And the more that you do those things together, the more that those neurons wire together and the more that they fire together. So much so that you may find that just by something as simple as lighting incense, you start to find yourself drifting into more of a meditative state. Now, the idea behind that building neuroplasticity can come from a lot of different things, but one of the main things I want to talk about is positive thinking. So again, when we look at the whole idea of yama, which is from 2 different videos ago, we were talking about Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga. And the first limb is yama. One of the things within yama that we're supposed to abstain from is violence. And in the second limb, which is niyama, we're supposed to practice the idea of contentment, the idea of pleasure, the idea of positivity. So if we look at this, what we're really saying here is we need to stop having all of these negative thoughts and we need to shift them into positive thoughts, because that's the only way, guys, that's the only way we're going to be able to create enough neuroplasticity to do what we want to do in meditation, because we need to have a very neuroplastic brain. So the other piece of the brain training is nervous system regulation. And I'm going to key in on this one as well because it's super important and we don't think about it enough. I want you to realize that most of the guided meditations that you are doing, most of them are really just about regulating your nervous system. You want to create more peace, happiness. You want to experience this heart-centered meditation. What you want to do is you want to calm your nervous system down. If you're stuck in fight or flight all the time, then going into something like that, where you're being told by someone that you can experience this immense love, this immense, connection to divinity, this connection to an all source of the universe that gives you this all-pervading sense that you are loved, that you are cared for, that you are never alone, that everything is going to be all right. And as you feel that warm up through your heart center, it starts to spread throughout all of your chakras, enlightening all of your chakras, bringing them up to a higher vibration that allows you to know that you're in control of your destiny because it's guided by your heart. Now, again, what we're really saying here is, I want to regulate my nervous system so I don't feel like I'm in fight or flight all the time. So, again, there are many techniques out there for that. Breath work has a big piece of that puzzle. Somatic experiencing, somatic therapy, self-hypnosis, positive affirmations, even the idea of polyvagal theory. You can look up all of those. But what we need to do before we start getting into meditation, really and truly as a serious practice, we need to learn how to regulate our nervous system. We need to learn how to get to a place where we're not constantly throwing this overthinking spiral so that we get into fight or flight. And we're constantly hyped up like this or just totally numbed out to life. We need to get into a place where we feel safe, secure, protected, and loved. And that's a parasympathetic state because that's the state with which we're going to do a lot of these meditative practices. So again, before we go into really and truly practicing meditation, we need to use things like breath work. I'll give you one right off the bat, heart rate variability breathing. Super, super huge. You can use Wim Hof breathing as well. But again, heart rate variability breathing, where you're breathing out for double the amount of time that you're breathing in, and you're actively trying to relax all your tissue, is going to relax your vagus nerve, and it's going to start to create a parasympathetic response because you're getting more carbon dioxide out of your body. The whole idea of this is that when we have too much carbon dioxide buildup in our body, it creates stress. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and exhale all your breath and then just try to hold your breath with that exhale for as long as you can. And what you'll start to notice is that at a certain point, you get that urge to breathe. And the more that you fight that urge to breathe, the worse it starts to feel. It's because of the carbon dioxide buildup that you have in your system. The problem is that most people have a very low tolerance to carbon dioxide. And because they have that low tolerance to carbon dioxide, it's also an indicator, it's been found, research has shown, that it's an indicator that there's a low tolerance to stress. Again, if you want to meditate, you have to learn how to regulate your nervous system, create a sense of safety, and that parasympathetic response being stronger than the sympathetic response builds that resilience to stress because now you have a safety net to work off of. So nervous system regulation, super duper important to our meditation practice. Now, the final one we're going to talk about is conscious prep. So when we're looking at the idea of getting into these meditative states, one of the first things that we need to understand is, again, dharana, right? We have pranayama, we have all these other ones, which is just the idea of focusing on our breathing. But the other thing that we want to get to is one-pointed concentration. Why? Because it's a focused attention state. So again, you pick a meditation object. That might be a flame, something you're looking at. It might be the idea of a deity, or heck, it could even just be, your breath or the tip of your nose. It can literally just be the tip of your nose. If you can feel the tip of your nose and stay focused on feeling the tip of your nose and only focus on feeling the tip of your nose, congratulations, you're doing one-pointed focused meditation. Now, the reason why you want to do that before you do any of the other states of meditation is because if you don't have the ability to focus your attention, then what's going to happen when you get into meditation is that you're going to start to falter, and that default mode network is going to kick back up and the overthinking is going to take over, and you're not going to be able to keep your focus. And keeping the focus is the goal of meditation because the focused attention is what we guide to create these different experiences of altered states of consciousness and heightened states of consciousness. If I cannot keep that focused attention, meditation is not going to happen for me, not real meditation. So the other thing that we want to look at is the inverse of that. So there's one-pointed concentration, and then there's just in overall observation, which is a diffusion of my awareness. These are the only two things that I can do, guys. I can either focus my attention on one singular thing, or I can diffuse my attention and not focus on anything. And these are the two key principles that we need before we enter into higher states of meditation. So what does that look like? Well, that looks like sitting down, not playing music or anything else. Or you can play music if you want, but sitting down and just being with yourself. Simple as that. Sit down, breathe, be with yourself. Why? Because as you do that, you start to create this diffusion of your awareness. And what you'll typically find is that as you diffuse your awareness, what's going to happen is certain things are going to become more important in your mind's eye than other things. That's a focused attention, but it's not one that you created consciously. And it usually means that the things that become in your awareness are the things you've been hiding from. So again, cycling all the way back up to that idea of therapy and emotional processing, going to be a really important part of that, because as you start to get to a place where you have a good handle on that one-pointed concentration and that idea of that mindfulness meditation or that observational meditation, this idea of being able to absorb everything and just experience without judging or without trying to do something. Once you get to that state and you start to build that consistency, then you're ready to start to go into those next stages of meditation. And we're not going to go over all of them from the framework of the Buddhist side of things. If you guys are interested in it, let me know. And in the comments, let me know, and maybe I'll make a whole video on that. But it would be way too long to go into in this video. Instead, what we're going to talk about is what you should be experiencing when you're first starting these stages of meditation. And what we're going to talk about is absorption. Now, not samadhi level absorption, but just a lower level of absorption. So you've done all this pre-work. You've created that neuroplasticity. And beyond that, you've gotten to the point where you have proper one-pointed concentration as well as an open awareness. So now what? Well, now you start getting into the real breadth of meditation, into the real depth of meditation, which is how you focus your awareness. So the first thing that you want to start looking at, and we're only going to go into the first few stages of this because this is going to take some time if you're doing it appropriately. When you sit down for meditation at this point, what you want to do is you want to find yourself in a body position where your spine is opened up, where your belly is relaxed, and where you, in and of yourself, can feel calm, cool, and collected. This is that parasympathetic response. So you start getting into that parasympathetic response by controlling and modulating that breath. The way that you do that is by focusing on your breath. So you make your breath your focused object in meditation. You concentrate on your breath, but you don't actively try to make your breath happen. And this is the key. This is the part that people miss. Ugh, God. What people miss about this part is that they think that they're supposed to make their breath happen. And while that is true to a certain extent, it's one of the hangups that we get into with meditation. Here's the reason why. Let's say, for instance, that I start focusing on my breath and I start controlling my breath. Now, here's the question. Am I actually focusing on the somatic response of my breath coming in and out of my body? Or am I just simply focusing on making my breath happen? Because they're two different conscious processes, right? The one is me feeling my breath coming in and out of my body. The other one is me saying, I'm the one breathing. Now, here's the problem. What we tend to do is we tend to oscillate between the two, which means we don't create a focused one-pointed attention. Instead, we'll start focusing on the breathing, and then we'll start shifting into doing the breathing. And then we'll come back to focusing on the breathing and then shift into doing the breathing, which means that if that's what's happening, we're still not at a place where we have appropriate one-pointed concentration. So if that's something that's happening, we're in a place where we're not fully connected to that one-pointed concentration yet, which means that we need to go back and we need to start focusing on the one-pointed concentration. If we can get to a place when we sit down for meditation that we can actually bring our awareness just simply to what's happening with the breath. So one way that we can do this is by focusing on the root tip of the nose and feeling the breath moving through that space in and out. Now, the goal is not to follow the breath, right? Because that would be a conscious process of following each one of these somatic areas. It's to pick a point and stay focused on it. And then as your mind wanders, just bring it back, pick that point and stay focused on it. What we're doing here is we're turning down the default mode network. Now, once we do that, this is the important second step. What you'll start to recognize is at a certain point, the breath becomes the only thing you're aware of. And what I mean by that is for most people, this is where initially they think they've reached enlightenment because they're like, oh my gosh, there was nothing. There was just this exchange of energy. But in truth, that's not even meditation yet, guys. What that is that's a one-pointed concentration on our breath. Now, the reason why this is important is because it's the start of that shutting down of the default mode network and going into a just single focused attention. Once we have that single focused attention, what you'll find is that your breath almost starts to feel like it's happening on its own. And if it doesn't, the reason why is because you haven't released the breath yet. And that means that once again, you've gone from focusing on that root point tip of the nose back into focusing on being the one that's breathing, which means that once again, we have this problem with concentration that's not quite up to speed to where it needs to be to get to the next stage. The final one that we'll talk about in this video is what happens after that. And what happens after that is where we have to diffuse our attention. Now, this is really important because these are stages and steps. So when we look at this whole idea of the breath, when it comes to meditation, the breath is my initial conscious focus, but eventually I let go of the breath and I let the breath just naturally happen. And for most people, this can usually be what's very disturbing as a feeling because they've never been consciously aware of being unconsciously breathing. I'll say that again. You've probably never been consciously aware of the fact that you are not the one who is consciously making your breath happen. This is a separation of awareness where the body goes into its autonomic state, meaning it goes into just what it does when we don't tell it what to do. But we are still consciously aware and we are witnessing that. So this is akin to the same idea of like if you're falling asleep and you get to this place when you fall asleep where you start to realize you can't feel your body, but you're still in your body. And your body's breathing, but you're not the one doing the breathing. It can be a really scary state for most people. Sometimes they call it sleep paralysis, where it's like you can't move your body, but you're still in your body. That's terrifying for a lot of people. That's what we're looking for in meditation. So just keep that in mind. Again, this is a road that a lot of people are going to find a lot of discomfort with because it's going to show you the realization of what you're actually capable of. It's going to show you that you have the ability to bring your conscious awareness to where you are completely aware that your breath just moves on its own. And it just moves on its own, and you don't need to do anything to make it move. And so when you get to this stage where you've been able to bring your conscious awareness to that root tip of your nose or to your belly or to wherever, but that single pointed focus enough to where that's the only thing that your mind focuses on, to where all the sounds around you and everything else, none of it's there anymore. You're only singularly focused on that breath. There are no other thoughts that are coming in and out, just the breath. It's the only object you're focused on. Then what you have to do is you have to actually let go of the focus on that and come to a place where your focus is diffused throughout the whole of your surroundings. What do I mean by that? Well, this is the difference between the one-pointed focus that we just talked about and that fully absorbed observational focus, meaning that no one thing is being focused on more than anything else. Once we get to this stage, this is where we have to start looking at relaxing the body and relaxing the mind. And this is where we're going to kind of cut off for now. But what I want you to really think about is I want you to think about where you are right now when it comes to your guided meditation practice or so on and so forth versus what we're talking about now. Have you ever reached a state before in your meditation practice where you felt this sense that your body was breathing and you were not the one doing it? And you didn't get caught up in the thoughts of, oh my gosh, what's happening? Whoa, this is crazy. And then lost it. Have you ever gotten to a place where you can just sit with that for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes, sit with that feeling unendingly, that your breath is just moving in and out of its own volition, that you don't have to do anything, that you don't have to try to do anything, and that you can simply just be in that space with everything happening and you not worrying or attending to anything. No thoughts going through your mind, just simply being. That is the preparation before we get into these higher states of consciousness. So start there. Focus on all of these pre-preparatory things that we talked about But start there. Get all of this pre-preparation and get to that point. And I promise you, even if you can just get to that point, you're going to be so much happier with your meditation practice, and you're going to be so much happier in life in general because you're going to be so much more aware of what's happening around you. You'll be shocked what these kinds of practices will do for not only your mental health, but your mental awareness. You'll start walking around the world feeling awake and alive for the first time in your life, and it's just because now you're using your brain the way it was designed, to its fullest potential. So I hope that helps. And remember, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next episode.